All right, so let's start out this episode with some crazy procedural show-style jazz music. I'm hoping Antonio actually plays some here.
You got it, boss.
But that'll set the mood, right, Taxi? This show makes such bizarre choices. Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the next episode of Taxi. Now, if you're enjoying these episodes, or if you're just a fan of Taxi and you enjoy consuming content about it, please consider subscribing and or following, like the episodes, and comment or email your questions to the email that will be placed below, I think. Anyway, please also consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page at patreon.com/TheRankPodcast. Now, today we're ranking the 7th episode of the 2nd season of Taxi, titled A Woman Between Friends, which was written by Ken Eston and directed by Jimmy Burrows. Now, this series is 45 years old, so spoiler alert, I guess. If you're interested in watching Taxi and you haven't after 45 years, I don't know what you're doing watching me or listening to me right now.
Please don't leave!
Anyway, the whole goal of this series is to figure out what is the best sitcom of all time, right? So I'm ranking series, going episode by episode. So we rank each episode, those episodes get tallied up and then averaged, and that gives us a series average, and it tells us what tier each series is in, what tier each episode is in, what's the best episode per season, all that. That's basically the goal here. Let's dive into this episode, starting with the Potent Notables. So this 29th episode of Taxi was released on Tuesday, October 30th, 1979. It was 8th for the week at a 24.6 rating, just behind Mork and Mindy, which had a 24.8. Now, it didn't beat its lead-in, Three's Company, which was in second this week at a 28.6. Three's Company was actually beat by Jaws. So yes, the movie Jaws got a 39 rating. It was the #1 TV program for this week in 1979. 39% of households were tuned in to Jaws on television. Just blows my mind that back then you would just be like, wow, Jaws is on TV, I gotta watch. And now we stream it on our phones.
Amazing, isn't it? What modern technology can do.
Anyway, it was second best for the vaunted ABC Tuesday lineup. So on to our next and final Potent Notable. We got a guest actor spotlight. Her name is Constance Forsland, who plays Janet in this episode. Well, she's still out there acting today. She actually played Marilyn Monroe, not just once, but twice, saying, quote, "I didn't want to do an impersonation. I wanted to find her vulnerability, her wit, and what made her so magnetic." She started on the stage and worked on Broadway in her early career and then transitioned to guest roles in a lot of shows, including this one, but also Chips, Murder, She Wrote, and The Love Boat. She has a nice perspective about her career, saying, quote, "That's the joy of being a character actor. You get to step into so many lives." I thought was nice. So there you go. That's Constance Forsland, a little mini recap of her career here. And let's go straight to the episode overview. All right, so let's start out this episode with some crazy procedural show-style jazz music. I'm hoping Antonio actually plays some here.
You got it, boss.
But that'll set the mood, right, Taxi? This show makes such bizarre choices, like playing slow procedural jazz music at the beginning of the episode right after the theme song plays. But, I was definitely like, what am I in for when that music started playing right after the theme song? As it turns out, what we're in for is a very typical sitcom story where two friends fight over a person that they're both attracted to, with a weird B story about Alex having a toothache. Anyway, the two friends that are fighting are Bobby and Tony. So I was a little worried to get a Bobby-heavy episode, but this was a pleasant surprise. It starts off a little slow, and I think because the show has not earned the built-in trust from me, I was sort of cautious, even though some of the lines to start out the episode were fairly decent. Like when Tony says he's broke up with Kathy, and they're like, well, when? And he's like, just as soon as I can get to a payphone. That's not great, but it's a decent line. It's okay. Like if you already had established that you could trust that a series was really funny, and you heard that, you'd be like, okay, I'm in line for a laugh, But it took me a while because I'm like, okay, I can see this is kind of fun, but where are we headed? Basically, what happens is that Tony and Bobby argue about who should get to ask this attractive girl. She walks into the restaurant, and they're like, whoa, she's really gorgeous. And they fight over asking her out. Of course, what they end up doing is they decide that both of them will, and they flip a coin for who gets to go first. Now, at this point, Elaine Nardo is going to stand up for all women. How this hasn't already happened is beyond me, because there's been plenty of episodes where it should have, but it's also really strange that this is the moment. They're flipping coins for who's going to ask her out. I mean, I don't know. Am I crazy? I don't see how that's really demeaning. It wasn't like they were debating her ownership or something. She still has the fidelity to say no to either of them, which they both accept about the situation. So why is this bad? There's been so many other things in this show that it's odd to me that this is where she's taking her stand. Anyway, Bobby wins the coin toss and gets to ask her out first, and we're starting to get the sense that this is a Jeff Conaway ego rub episode. And it's only going to get worse, in the sense of rubbing Jeff Conaway. Like, Tony is bemoaning how Bobby has all the great pickup lines and he can't compete with them. But then he decides, he figures out a way. It's like, I know how I can compete with him. He just stands up and says, "Hey lady, whatever he says to you, me too." Now that was my first laugh for the laugh counter, and it definitely settled me into what this episode was going to be, which was enjoyable. You'd think that wouldn't be a surprise, but there hasn't been much in this series that has done that for me, so I was pleasantly surprised. And right after that, we go to the garage and we get some fun with Latka, which almost always works, and this is one of those almost always times. This is where the show really works, in my opinion, when it's the cast hanging out at the garage and just messing around. There are still those moments that aren't fantastic, but we avoid them mostly here. No long monologues, no unfunny storylines. We get some goofy stuff where Bobby is going to hit himself instead of Tony hitting him, but it wasn't so goofy that it took you out of it. And it was, it was fun. Also, just before that, there was a scene where Elaine confirms Tony's suspicions that Bobby is the best looking and most talented guy in the garage. What? There must be a dearth of beauty and talent in this garage. Either way, Elaine tries to reason with them and get them to stop fighting. Eventually, she comes up with the idea that they should make Janet choose between them. Now, if you're thinking, well, that's weird that was an idea that she had to come up with, I thought that too. They acted like this was such a novel idea, but whatever, it's fine. They convince Alex to come with them to tell her that she needs to choose so that they don't have to, which was a really confusing addition. And a lot of times they do this with Alex, where it's like, was there like a contractual thing where Judd Hirsch had to be in like every scene or something? I don't really understand the dynamic there. I guess they needed to have Alex on screen for this. At first he's like, no, I don't need to go, but then he does. He does because he wants to avoid going to the dentist, which Elaine scheduled him an appointment because I don't know why she did that, but she did, and she'll do it again later. And the whole thing is he really doesn't like going to the dentist, which is basically the whole B story. Now it all culminates with making Janet choose, but right before she does, Bobby and Tony decide that instead of either of them feeling bad, they're just gonna both stop seeing her. So instead of both of them feeling bad, or either of them feeling bad, she feels bad. Of course, that means she's going to get back at them, right? By telling them both about how she was really going to take whoever she chose to Bone Town that night. Like it was going to be the best night of their lives. And then she says, I was going to choose Bobby. So I'm really confused by what the producers of this show saw in Jeff Conaway.
Well, he's a good-looking man.
But whatever. They clearly liked him. That's besides the point, though, because this bit did work. It was fun. Also, Bobby's really upset to hear that he won't get the Bone Town treat. But Tony's like, I think we made the right choice. It was fun. So you would think that would be the end, but we're actually going to close the episode with completing the B story, where Elaine has scheduled another dentist appointment for Alex, and it's in 10 minutes because, she doesn't want to give him a chance to say no. He's like, nah, my tooth's better. She's like, all right, well, drink this cold soda. And he does. And he doesn't flinch. So she's like, look, I don't know how you did that, but if you're willing to do that, then I guess don't go to the dentist, right? The joke is that he's holding it in because then he breaks the arm off of the chair and it's like, Elaine, I want to go. Now, the way I described it, I don't know if that makes it sound like it was funny.
No, not really.
It was funny. It was a good bit at the end there. But that was it. That's the whole episode. So let's go on to the rank.
Oh, Wayne.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I add my laugh counter at the end, which is where I tally up the amount of times that the episode made me laugh out loud, 1 point per laugh out loud, and that gets added to the score. First category is story, and I gave story a 4. Now this is a fairly typical sitcom story, but that doesn't mean it's not a good one. There's a reason they reuse this story in so many different series. It's because it's usually funny and fun, and it is here too. So on to acting, which I gave a 3.25. Now I know Constance Forsland wasn't in the episode much as Janet, but she was not good. Like pretty not good. She's no Randall Carver bad, but she might have been if they had made her a regular character. Although I bet we would have seen growth there, unlike with Randall. Anyway, it was Bobby-centric, so you know it wasn't going to be great acting. Mary Lou Henner was fine. Judd Hirsch was fine. Tony Danza was actually pretty good. I mean, Constance definitely drives the score down, but it wasn't going to be super high anyway. Still, 3.25 is about average, which I think is cool. We go on to dialogue, which I gave a 4. This episode was really good. It had fun dialogue. It didn't get a huge score on the laugh counter, but it was a lot more fun than it has been. The dialogue made me smile pretty consistently, and maybe it should be higher than a 4. I don't know. It feels 4 is right feeling to me, so I'm leaving it. So let's go to the episode coherence category, which I gave a 4.5. Look, other than insisting that Alex be in the restaurant to tell Janet to pick between Bobby and Tony, which he never even actually does, by the way, it's perfectly coherent. Obviously, I can't give it a better score because of that silly bit there, but it's not that big of a deal. The characters all felt right and the story didn't feel like it lagged at all. It was well done. So to the last category, which is character relatability, I gave a 4.25. I don't think there's anything particularly unrelatable about this, but I wasn't watching thinking, wow, this is really a reflection of what life is like. But I could see thinking that a friendship could handle it, and then the stress makes the friendship falter. I can also appreciate Alex not wanting to see a dentist. I'm not really sure I get Elaine acting as his secretary, but whatever. It was pretty relatable. That leaves us with the laugh counter, which I got 12, which is not a huge amount, but it's into double digits. That's not bad at all. So there you have it, a grand total of 32, which makes it I'd watch it again. As for the series average, it went up to a 24.97, which still keeps it within the rank it and regret it, but just one more even slightly decent episode and it's back up in mediocre. I could deal with a mediocre Taxi at this point. All right, well, thanks for listening, everybody, or watching. If you'd like to see a list of our episode and series rankings, you can do that on our website at therankpodcast.com. Remember to subscribe, review, and comment, and please consider supporting us on our Patreon site at patreon.com/therankpodcast, where you can access all of our archived episodes. And I'll leave you with this. They almost scrapped the scene between Mary Lou Henner and Tony Danza when he was asking about Bobby because it was taking so many takes. I'm sure you're wondering why. It's because Mary Lou kept throwing up in her mouth when she had to say that he was the most handsome and talented guy there.
Why do you hate him so much?
Yeah. Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking another awesome.
Not awesome.